Thank you everyone again for joining October's Tenant Talk Live. Again, today's topic is preventing evictions in immigrant communities. And for folks who might be joining this call for the first time, my name is Sid Betancourt. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a manager of inclusive community engagement at the Coalition. And again, if folks are new, you're joining Tenant Talk Live. We provide opportunities for residents and tenants to connect with NLIHC and also one another, share best practices, learn how to be more involved in influencing federal housing policies and leading within their communities. And today we have an awesome guest joining us from the Rent Brigade to talk about some of the work that they're doing in California. Before I turn it over to them, though, we have a few updates to get through, so I'm just going to quickly go over them. The first one always being our community agreements. So let me share my screen really fast. Okay, here we go. So our community agreements, just a reminder, folks, that this call is being recorded and we'll be uploading it to YouTube later for other folks to see this afterwards. So just a reminder as you're sharing. And then the first rule is the platinum rule, so treating others the way they want to be treated. So in other words, please consider how others want to be treated and how that might differ from how you want to be treated. And this rule differs from others because it rejects the idea that reciprocity is the norm and favors empathy and grace instead. And it encourages participants to build connections and understand each other's preferences. And then the second rule is we show respect to others by being considerate of our actions and our interactions, or our interactions and accountable for our actions. Number 3, we listen actively with an open mind and empathy. We listen with the intent to learn something of value from those who are sharing, and we are as attentive to and present with each other as possible. And then number 4, we take up space and remember to give space to other folks as well to ensure everyone feels empowered to contribute to the conversation. And this is a really big one, you guys, just making sure that we're muted if we're not speaking. But if you don't get to it in time, somebody on our team will get to you. So just wanted to let you know. And if you guys want to see those community agreements again, I'll put them in the chat. And if you have any feedback on our community agreements, you can always email me that. And you can see my email in the chat as well. And then we also send out our weekly recap materials in our Friday connection email. So if you're not signed up for NLIHC emails, you won't get the recap, but you can sign up in the link that I just dropped in the chat as well. So we have one more update for you guys, but I'm going to turn it over to our friend Marie Claire at the National Housing Law Project to share more about that update with you.
Hi, thanks, Sid. And thanks everyone for giving me a minute here today. I see a lot of familiar faces, so it's nice to see everyone. So I'm Marie Claire Tran Leung. I'm a senior staff attorney at the National Housing Law Project. We have been working with the Coalition and other national partners to prepare for HUD to try to bring back the mixed status role. So for those of you who aren't familiar, in HUD housing, families can live together if as long as at least one member of their family is either a citizen or has eligible immigration status. And that's been the law for a long time. So there are some families within HUD housing that have mixed immigration statuses. The Trump administration during the first term tried to take that away. And there was a lot of pushback against that proposal, and the coalition that worked on that was able to kind of stop the administration from doing that. Trump administration like to do that again. And last week there was a news article that came out that showed what the proposed policy change would look like. So there's been a lot of work to lay the groundwork for opposing that, including a lot of leadership here at the coalition, the National Low-Income Housing Coalition. The reason why I'm coming today is because I am based in Los Angeles, and so I'm excited that the Rent Brigade is going to talk today about the research they've done. But we have been working with some groups, some tenant groups specifically in Los Angeles who have been working specifically with mixed status families who are currently living in HUD housing. So that includes public housing, the voucher program, project-based rental assistance, and other programs. They would really love to be able to connect with other tenant organizations who are also working with families to try to strategize on how to, protect those families, but also organize them and kind of bring their voices center to a lot of these campaigns. And my pitch today is, if you all are working directly with HUD families, mixed status families who live in HUD housing, and would like to kind of be connected to others, I think there's like a great potential to do some cross mobilization and brainstorming as we wait for HUD to introduce this proposal, which it hasn't yet. So I wanted to just make that plug today, and also note that we know that the families, the mixed status families, are most prominent in the highest numbers are in California, New York, and Texas. And so if any of you are in those states and work with families and want to be connected, I can pop my email in the chat and would love to follow up. And yeah, if there's any other questions, when the rule comes out, I think we'll have a lot more to train people on and to answer questions. But mainly wanted to make that pitch today.
Thank you, Mary Claire. We have time for like maybe one question if somebody has a question, but I did drop your email in the chat for folks to reach out to you. Cool. Okay, cool. So thank you, Mary Claire, and we'll include that information in the follow-up materials too. And now it's time for our extroverts' favorite time of the call, which is our breakout rooms. So we'll do that really quickly before we get into the content of today's call. And you'll have 10 minutes in these breakout rooms. Today's question is going to be, what piece of advice have you received that has stuck with you? And I actually stole this question from one of our like internal icebreaker questions, but I really liked it. So I hope you guys have a good time talking about it today too. Again, if you're joining as a speaker or as a guest today, like feel free to join those as well. But if you're an introvert and want to hang out with me out here, you're welcome to as well. But we'll be back in 10 minutes. Everybody, and thank you, CJ. Okay, we're gonna keep moving, but we have time for maybe one or two people if they want to share about some of the advice that they shared in their breakout rooms. If you want to raise your hand or come off mute. I think I saw Amy unmute, but maybe I imagined it. Jennifer.
Hi, y'all. I'm Jennifer Mohawk. Since we've got more than one Jennifer, it's okay to call me just Mohawk. And the most important thing I think that I was told is to avoid overly simple, overly easy answers to questions. There's often a lot more that you don't immediately see. It can be easy to kind of go for an answer to something that would that's convenient, okay, but it may not be fully. Well, in other words, the bad folks don't always look like monsters. The good folks don't always come in there with the white hat. Sometimes you have to dig a bit deeper. The details are very important.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing. Is there anyone else that wants to share? Give you a minute. Okay, Chandra, go ahead.
Oh, did I get? Oh yeah.
You're
There we
good.
go. So, we actually talked a little bit about a couple of things, but I think I didn't. The first thing that came to mind when you asked the question was something I didn't think was terribly relevant until we kind of started discussing it.
No.
it takes time to save time. And I had just done like a lived experience video talking about like how my housing person was basically like she was overworked, she was very stressed out, and she just didn't have the time. And I think what it came down to was like, I wanted them to know, like, I would rather that they took the time for themselves and self-care and even cut me out of their client list or said they couldn't fit me in than have felt like they were just pushing me to something just to get me off their plate really fast. So just really building that rapport and, taking that extra time and not just, worrying about just kind of like building that rapport more than anything, I think, because there wasn't anything. It was hard to get to know her and understand where she was coming from because she was too busy. And it was hard to get to know me and know where I was coming from. So she was just frustrated. So taking the time.
Yeah. And the relationships and trust are an important part of the work too. So I appreciate you bringing up that example. If you guys are okay with it, we'll move forward. I want to make sure that our guest has enough time to share, but thank you everybody. So today we have Denton Cohen joining us from the Rent Brigade in LA. And I'll let Denton share a little bit more about himself, but in case you guys didn't catch the e-blast, he's a public servant, a labor organizer, and policy researcher. And also a proud member of the UAW local 872. I think an alum now actually, but in his free time he actually does a lot of work around housing advocacy, and this is one of those things. So Denton, I'll hand it over to you to share a little bit more about your work.
Thank you so much, Sid, and thank you to everyone on this call. I feel very honored and very grateful to be able to meet all of you today and speak with all of you today. I do have some brief slides to share a little bit more about the work that we've been doing as the Rent Brigade, but I do just want to say I want to keep it short. I want to like be in community with you all and frankly like learn about the work that some of you are doing as well. And so yeah, just wanted to start with saying how honored I am to be here. And thank you again, Sid and NLIHC for giving us the time. Yeah, super briefly about myself. I'm originally from Ohio, and I moved out to LA to go to grad school and study public policy. I have a labor organizing background. I helped start the Graduate Student Worker Union at USC, and yes, was a founding member of UAW Local 872, so I'm very proud UAW. And I now work for our council member Nithya Raman, although I'm very much here in my personal capacity and in my capacity as a member of the Rent Brigade. And so if I could I'll just share my screen really quickly and go through a few things. So it's been a really tough year in LA, and I want to start with sort of what the situation has been, even before this year started. We are in a full-fledged housing crisis in LA that I know in many ways is also the case across the country, but we really do feel a lot of these very acute impacts of the housing crisis here in LA. So you all can see that almost two-thirds of households in LA are renter households, and the vast majority of us are rent burdened. And we also have the single largest unsheltered and unhoused population in the country. There are more than 75,000 unhoused people living in LA County, and about 70% of our unhoused neighbors are also unsheltered. And so homelessness is very visible in LA. And unfortunately, even though we've made some progress on homelessness in the last couple of years, the twin recent crises that we've had, along with the federal budget cuts, are going to add a lot more fuel to the fire. We really did start off this year in one of the most disastrous ways imaginable. Even before Trump took office, we had the devastating Palisades and Eaton fires that destroyed over 12,000 homes, that killed dozens, if not hundreds, and so many excess deaths in January and February. Hundreds of thousands of people had to evacuate their homes. And unfortunately, what we saw really in the days following the fires was landlords, particularly corporate landlords, but also small landlords, using the crisis to illegally do price gouging of rental homes. And so we have a statewide law that makes it illegal to price gouge, just to keep moving. I don't want to get too wonky, but essentially you can't raise the rent more than 10% for active listings. And you also can't list new rentals during the state of emergency that are over 160% of the fair market rent. And pretty immediately, people across LA began to see listings on Zillow that were blatantly rent gouged. And so, led by Chelsea Kirk, who's the policy director for SAGE, one of our fabulous housing advocacy orgs here in LA, and sort of spontaneously and using social media, hundreds of people began contributing listings to a crowdsourced spreadsheet of listings that were being illegally rent gouged. Here are a few of the favorites. We see a 2-bedroom, or sorry, I think this was a 3-bedroom actually being listed literally on the day of the fires for $3,595. The day after, the landlord decided to raise the price by almost $1,000, and then the next day realized, oh, they could get even more for it, and so they raised it by 1,000. There were so many listings like this, too many to count. And so we sort of, teamed up, and data data engineers joined the team, and we were able to build a tool that scraped Zillow and created sort of a daily database of all of the illegally rent gouge listings that were being listed on Zillow. And so, really over the first week or so after the fires, we started to take shape as the Rent Brigade. We actually get our name from a local reporter who said, who called us the Spreadsheet Brigade. That's helping keep rent, from exploding in LA after the fires. And so we are a group entirely of volunteers, of tenant organizers, policy researchers, data engineers, comms professionals, graphic designers. We're all renters. Not a single one of us owns a home, unsurprisingly. And we're all Angelinos. We all care deeply about our city and about our neighbors. And that's very much an animating force behind everything that we do. And so within a couple weeks, we had, within a few weeks of the fires, we put out our first report that, established how widespread rent gouging was after the fires. Thousands and thousands of listings that were illegally being listed on Zillow and being rented out to families who had lost their homes in the fires in the Palisades or Altadena, and to just everyday tenants who are trying to find housing in an already very tight rental market. And so, we sent weekly reports of rent gouge listings to officials, and, we made local, state, and national news with our, reporting really on rent gouging. Unfortunately, as we'll see, there were, local and state officials really did drag their feet and continue to drag their feet today in actually prosecuting and imposing civil penalties on the landlords who took advantage of this crisis and rented out units. And so that was really a shame. We issued a second report naming the perpetrators, the 10 largest rent gougers in LA. And unfortunately, and you see these 3 elected officials who primarily are responsible for enforcing rent gouging laws. Unfortunately, they were some of the largest recipients of campaign donations in the past cycle from the top 10 rent gougers. And so we unfortunately have a very, very, very powerful landlord lobby in Los Angeles and across the state of California. And so that's always what we're up against when we're fighting for greater protections. And so, yeah, I mean, there have been a very small amount of people charged. Only 16 people have been charged to date. And I checked the numbers today, and we are at over 16,500 units of housing that have been listed at gouged prices. And so, we did win some important, we got some important wins out of this, including raising fines, including taking the sort of sole ability to fight to issue penalties to landlords away from the county DA and actually gave it to a county department so they can directly fine landlords. But this is very much a fight that continues here in Los Angeles. And so, just sort of that's where we come from. We were a group that formed, just earlier this year after the fires. And, not 5 months after the fires, almost exactly 5 months after the fires, actually, is when the federal government began their what can only be described as a reign of terror in Los Angeles that continues today. Since June, federal immigration authorities have conducted hundreds and hundreds of warrantless arrests. They are openly racially profiling people and have abducted thousands of our neighbors off the streets. We have been under military occupation. And many of you may know that LA was in many ways the first city to experience this occupation, but obviously we are not the last. And part of the reason that I am glad to be on this call today is to help share best practices and to share sort of what our experience has been in LA, because unfortunately this is coming to a city near you. And so communities have been economically devastated by this crisis, as well as just like obviously deeply traumatized. And so, as the Rent Brigade, actually, sorry, before I get to how we fit into this as the Rent Brigade, LA has been in uprising since June. People are fighting back. They're organizing. They're connecting with each other. They're stepping up to protect our neighbors. We have engaged in mass street demonstrations and civil disobedience. We have organized rapid response and patrol networks across LA. We have taken part in mass mutual aid efforts to support immigrant families and keep our neighbors housed. And we have also participated en masse in local advocacy campaigns to win direct relief. LA has been truly an exhibit in that solo el pueblo salva el pueblo. Truly, the people and the people who are in the streets, communities, are leading the fight against ICE. We are leading the fight against the government, against the federal government, rather, in LA. And so, we, as the Rent Brigade, we all have a lot of different backgrounds. We live in different parts of LA. We do different things, for our day jobs. And in June, we all, obviously keeping in close contact with each other, but we really put our rent gouging related work on pause, and we took part in various actions, and participated in organized efforts across LA to push back against ICE and to protect our immigrant neighbors. And it quickly became clear, and people quickly started to ask us if we sort of, as the Rent Brigade, could help fill a strategic void in in the movement, which was, and there's been some study of this. I do want to shout out UC Merced. They did an interesting initial study of economic impact. But we were really the first, and this came out of our conversations and being in community with organizations across LA. We were the first to actually study and try to measure the economic impact of the crisis on everyday working people and on everyday renters. And so throughout July and August, we worked with local tenant, worker, and immigrant rights organizations to survey over 120 immigrant renters in LA County. We interviewed immigrant families. We analyzed deportation and detainment data and tried to paint a broad picture of the effect that the ICE raids are having on our communities, and to really paint a picture of what we need to do as Angelenos, but also as our local government officials, what they can be doing right now to keep people housed and to protect people. And so we published the report last month, and since have been sort of supporting organizing efforts around direct rental relief and an eviction moratorium. Just to go over a few of the findings of our report, when I say devastating, I mean devastating. The average weekly earnings for immigrant renters in LA, it's fallen by about 62% since June. So that's just devastating for communities that are already on the margins, that are already facing higher eviction rates, that are already living in overcrowded housing. The fastest growing population of unhoused people in LA are Latinos, and specifically are undocumented Angelenos. And so, we found this rather absurd stat, which is that now immigrant renters in LA are paying 91% of their monthly income just directly toward rent. And what that means in practice, right, of course, is that people are falling behind on rent because they have to, pay for groceries. They have to pay other bills, right? And so this is sort of a major finding of our report, that people like truly cannot make rent. 28% of the people that we surveyed already owed more than 1 month's rent to their landlord. And so, this is already, grounds for eviction in LA. If you owe more than 1 month rent, your landlord can initiate eviction proceedings. And of course, undocumented immigrants see a lot of informal evictions in LA that don't go through the legal process. And so that's obviously a huge effort that over years to protect immigrant renters and to make sure that people know their rights. We also found that 12% of respondents that already their landlord had threatened to report them to ICE. So this is 1 in 8 renters who is already reporting that they've experienced harassment from their landlord based on either their actual immigration status or their perceived immigration status. And so just a few other notes here. 71% of respondents answered in the affirmative that they have returned to work in unsafe conditions out of fear of eviction. One of the major findings of our report was that people in LA are overwhelmingly being abducted at their place of work. There are the courthouse abductions that happen, and that was a chunk. But other than that, the vast majority of people are being taken at their place of work. So that's street vendors, that's jornaleros at, a Home Depot or another hardware store. These are people who are being abducted at their place of work. And so people are, facing this impossible choice. This fruit vendor that we interviewed said, should I go and take the risk, or should I let my family live without food? It's, we're seeing truly inhumane conditions for immigrant renters in LA. And so, just to sort of wrap this up, and then I want to, talk with you all. I mean, the bottom line is that there's no amount of policy advocacy, right, that we can do to get the Trump administration to stop an ICE, to stop sending ICE into our communities. There is policy advocacy that we can do on a local level, and of course, there's mass action that we can do to stop all of that. But sort of speaking specifically about policy advocacy, right? There are things that our local elected officials can do to stop evictions, to freeze rents, and to keep immigrants safe. And so we've been working, alongside, some of our other community organizations in LA, including CHIDLA, the LA Tenants Union, to push for an eviction moratorium, and also to push for direct rent relief, which we just won $30 million in rent relief at the county level, and we were a part of organizing people to show up and make public comment. We as the Rent Brigade did a one-click email campaign where we had hundreds and hundreds of emails sent to the County Board of Supervisors. And after voting it down 3-2, 2 weeks later, they voted on it again because we pressured them to. And they passed, it was actually initially going to be 20 million, and then they passed 30 million in rent relief and actually raised the cap. They also voted to explore an eviction moratorium. And so that's the next big fight for the tenant rights movement, for the immigrant rights movement, to push for local officials to keep people housed in that direct way. And so, I do, want to sort of kick it to questions. And I think I feel like I've covered 5% of what I would like to cover, but I wanted to be respectful of everyone's time and take questions. But I cannot stress enough how many incredible people across LA are doing incredible work. And for us as the Rent Brigade, we have been a very small part. I think we have punched above our weight in many ways as a pretty small group of volunteers. But we are always looking for how we can be a force multiplier for organizations in LA who are already doing this work, and also to be in community with tenant organizations across the US, because the two crises that we have been responding to as a group so far, with the fires, with this huge disaster that took so many, homes off the market, that devastated so many people economically, and then the following crisis, right, of occupation by the federal government and everything that comes with that. These are fights that we have to wage nationally and learn from locally. And so there are there is so much that we can learn from each other. Unfortunately, it probably won't be long before we once again experience a massive disaster somewhere in California. And, we'll be working with, tenant organizations and affected people in whatever area that is, to work with them on Penal Code 396 and enforcing the rent gouging laws. And of course, just across the country, we're all, waging these fights. And so, I'll leave it there. Would love to take questions, to have a conversation. But yeah, that's a little bit about the work that we're doing. And yeah, thanks so much again, Sid. I'm assuming you're gonna facilitate.
Yeah, and you can feel free to answer questions as they come in, but we do have one hand raised so far. We have Juan Pablo, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Denton. This has been super interesting. I work with Eviction Lab at Princeton University, and we follow all the reports that you put out. And I've been working
Likewise.
on a project long term on undocumented immigrants and evictions. And honestly, this was amazing to read. At the same time, LA is very particular, right? In like, it has a history of immigration advocacy and laws that can be a little bit more friendly towards immigrants. So
Yeah.
my question is for you, but also for Sid and for everyone else. It's very practical. So when we would talk to people that were threatened by evictions, a lot of times we say go to court, right? Like we say you have rights, go to court.
Mm.
With undocumented tenants, that advice has always been a little bit more nuanced and tricky, and I always felt more comfortable saying it in some places, like New York City or LA, but I always felt that it's a more difficult answer to give in places that are less immigrant friendly, like in Texas, on Florida, or other places. So I'm curious, yeah, like what kind of advice are you giving people when they face the possibility of a traditional like in court eviction?
Mm.
What are you recommending them to do? Also, how does that vary depending on different contexts that people have? I don't think I've seen any news of arrests from ICE in housing courts yet across the country, but that could happen any day, right? So yeah,
Mm.
I'm gonna shut up now and let you. But I'm also curious about like the answers that people in the room might be
Me
able.
too. Me too. I want to reserve time for folks. I'll say two very very quick things. One, that you're totally right. In LA, we have laws on the books that are more tenant friendly. That doesn't mean that they're always enforced. And so, but I'll just mention a few. I mean, we have tenant anti-harassment protections in LA. Unfortunately, as people in LA know, it is just not well enforced at all. In fact, it's barely enforced whatsoever. So that's just like an ongoing fight that we're waging here. We also have a tenant right to counsel that just passed and is going to be funded by Measure ULA, which is also another big tenant fight. And so we've been able to get laws on the books to protect tenants, and yet what we're seeing, right, in actuality, is so many, particularly immigrant renters, being evicted from their homes, totally outside of the system and totally outside of the legal system. And so just want to acknowledge that. One thing I will say, and then I want to, pass it to other folks in the room who might have ideas, is that, like, in addition to the work that we're doing as the Rent Brigade, that's more, policy focused, all of us individually and just as part of different collectives are organizing mutual aid for immigrant renters. That is something that you can do wherever you are, regardless of your circumstances, is try to organize your neighbors, right? Organize people in your community, to come together for people who are in need. And so I would point to mutual aid as one of the building blocks of tenant organizing in general. How can we show up for each other's material needs, while we also, fight on a larger scale? So yeah, I'll just say that, but would be very interested to see if other people who probably have a lot more experience than me organizing immigrant renters, and maybe other folks would want to reflect on that.
If there's anyone who wants to share, feel free to raise your hand. But in the meantime, I was gonna say too, I think I was speaking to someone recently who was talking about how they're using I don't even remember if it was you, Denton, too, but I was talking to someone recently who was talking about using court watching, and they also said cop watching, which I've never heard of before, but I think, you know, there's a lot of communities out there that are doing that now, and of course that's like a local um like movement where people will come together to support their neighbors in that way. And you know, there's just like a lot of things happening right now, and I feel like a lot of what we're seeing is people like recording it and putting it out there, and I think giving the exposure to things that they're like trying to hide, I think is good, but I might be wrong, I don't know. But that's my 2 cents on it. But if there's anyone else who would like to share too.
You said that people are trying to hide, you said? Sid?
Like in
Yeah. I'm just asking that to confirm because I think you know, but I have this WhatsApp hotline where people that are undocumented can reach out and ask questions. And the number of people even reaching out in a safe space like that has gone down like crazy. So like I
Yeah.
used to have 1 to 5 messages a week. And this is nationally. So like I normally point them out to different places. And now I maybe have 1 a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people are really scared. And it's valid, it's a very scary time. Um, but I was saying, like, you know, if people are trying to like round up folks and trying to do it under the radar like they did the other day in Chicago where they did it in the middle of the night, but people still reported on it, it was still being shown because a lot of people, you know, were taking videos or like taking note of it in other ways. I think just like trying to publicize those things is just as important as like organizing folks. Um, but yeah. I'm sorry to hear that though. That is a huge bummer. Um, but yeah, thank you, Juan Pablo, for your question. We have 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to other people. There was one question in the chat, but I'll just say it out loud so folks who are watching the video later can also get the question, but it was, what is Penal Code 386, which I think Denton talked about in the presentation. Yeah, you're welcome to go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, super happy to. Yeah, we actually we to fundraise we had hats that said just Penal Code 396, which I loved. We also had hats. It was that, and then it was Abolish Landlords. So those were our 2 hats that we used to fundraise. Penal Code 396 is a fabulous law here in California that we need to do much more to enforce. It imposes imposes. Wow, I sound like a landlord. It's a requirement that landlords not raise the rent by more than 10% during a state of emergency. And so it's a price control law essentially. It also mandates that landlords don't list a home on the market that's over 160% of fair market rent during a state of emergency. Unfortunately, due to some horrific state level laws that make it extraordinarily hard to do any sort of meaningful rent control here in California, that we have tried so hard to repeal over the years, most recently with Prop 33. But Penal Code 396 is essentially a form of rent control, a form of vacancy control. Even under local rent control laws, you can usually raise the rate of your of a vacant unit, very high, and sort of only occupied units that are truly like meaningfully bound by rent control laws not during the state of emergency. So during the state of emergency, there is a 10% limit on how much you can raise rents, regardless of whether it's vacant or occupied. And so it's a very powerful law, actually, and would be much more powerful if we enforced it, which there are many ways to enforce it, including you could just have basically an automatic system. These are listings that are posted publicly on Zillow, right, on apartments.com, on all of these online platforms. And so actually requiring that these platforms themselves prevent price gouge listings from coming on the market and having sort of a statewide and local level watchdogs for that. But anyway, it's a powerful law that we need everywhere. And so this is actually something that folks can fight for on a local or state level, a similar sort of price control law in your area during states of emergency. And yeah, it could be a strategic thing to try to fight for. Ideally before, but sometimes during or after a disaster is sort of the time that everybody's thinking about it and that you have a window to try to get something passed.
Thank you, Denton. And then Carrie, I see your hand up. That'll probably be the last question we take. Just let me
I
fix
love that so many nerds are involved in this mission. That's really awesome. What I'm wondering, and you're probably talking more about this at the NLIHC level in terms of the climate disasters and things like that. I know there's a working group for that, or there has been in the past. We're hearing so much about how FEMA now is not going to be responding to state of emergencies in the same way. How is that going to impact and cross over with the housing? Because if landlords, insurance companies, stuff like that know that that federal money might not be available, it seems like they're going to be a whole lot greedier.
That's a great question that I do not feel qualified to answer, but you raise a very interesting point. I don't know if Betty is responding to that. Maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Betty. I don't know if you wanted to.
Oh, no. I was just gonna ask, kind of like what Denton was just talking about. What's considered a state of emergency? Is like a natural disaster, or what is that? What could be considered, a state of emergency?
Yeah, so Penal Code 396, I believe, kicks in during any state of emergency. I believe I might say I'm a little rusty on that. I'm like, it's been a while since January. I believe it kicks in during any state of emergency, but historically it has been used after major disasters like an earthquake or like really bad wildfires, things like that. That's a great question though. I'm not actually sure if it kicks in. For example, if you declare a state of emergency during like in LA, the mayor declared a state of emergency after, while the protests were happening against ICE, things like that. So I'm not sure. Oh, I should mention COVID. COVID was a big time where this law kicked in because we were under a sort of public health related state of emergency. Yeah.
Yeah, I think somebody put it in the chat, but it's usually the governor that has to declare it, and then I think the president ends up okaying that.
And I'll just add something super quickly there, which is that I listed our wins. We also had many losses or near misses where there was a bill, it was AB 380 that was moving through the assembly, that passed committee, and then I don't think it ever came to a vote on the floor, but it was a law that would have made it sort of automatically, would have triggered the law automatically for neighboring counties, not just for the county where the disaster happened. And it would have also required that essentially state and local officials under whose responsibility it is to enforce this law, that they would have sort of had to essentially set up a task force, like basically like work together to have a real concentrated effort to enforce this law and to impose fines on landlords and send warning letters and everything. We came up short on that. And so, hoping next legislative cycle we can make some progress on that. But unfortunately, it will probably take another humongous, just based on how California policymaking works, it will probably take another disaster to get something like that bill further through. So yeah, definitely had a lot of things that we were trying to do that we did not get passed.
Thank you, Denton, and thank you everybody for the questions too. And Carrie, to answer your earlier question about FEMA, obviously there's just been a lot of questions about federal agencies and the federal employees and stuff, but I know that our disaster housing recovery coalition, and specifically like our staff that work on disaster recovery, have been keeping tabs on FEMA and like what they're working on, and I think they have like some sort of subcommittee or something where they're trying to figure out like is FEMA working essentially, but there's like a lot going on too. So I would definitely check out their weekly calls if you're interested in staying up to that stuff. But yeah, I'll hand it over to Denton just for a quick closeout, and then we'll end the call for today. But if y'all have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us afterwards if we don't get to them today.
Oop, I'm muted. That's the wrong screen, I think. Sorry, give me one
It
second.
happens to the best of us.
It really does. It really does. Okay, there we go. Wonderful. We want to be your co-conspirators as the Rent Brigade. So, you know, I have our email here, I have our Instagram here, I have our website. We really and we've done this several times actually, where folks have reached out and been like, hey, we want to do a similar report. Like, can we talk through some of the data stuff? I would not be the right person to talk through to really get into the data. We have some wonderful data folks who absolutely want to talk. You know, we you know, a few wonderful, incredible movement lawyers are part of the Rent Brigade who would love to, you know, talk about some of these legal issues. A lot of us have a lot of organizing experience, and so would love to talk through things. So we are very, very, very much here, and like we want to connect with people. That's part of the reason that we were so excited to be part of this call today, is to connect with more tenant orgs across the US. We are part of a national, and some would argue global, struggle against a lot of corporate greed, a lot of extreme, you know, right-wingers who want to use our broken housing system to terrorize the most vulnerable people in our community. So we are very much here to connect. We want to be your co-conspirators. So please, please, please do reach out. And we can have a conversation. We can talk about how to strengthen the work that we're doing together. So yeah, thank you so much again, Sid, NLIHC, and everybody on this call. It was such a joy to be with all of you today, and I feel very inspired by all the work that you all are doing. So thank you.
Yay. And thank you, Denton, for joining us too. I learned a lot and I'm excited, and hopefully y'all are inspired as well. And definitely connect with one another. We're gonna have to do this work together. So I'm glad we're escaping our silos for a quick second. But thank you again, everybody, for coming and for always being active in the chat and asking good questions. If y'all have feedback for me, or if you have any questions for me, my inbox is always open. But I think I said this earlier, I'll be out at an event this week, so if I don't get back to you right away, just know that I'll get back to you when I'm in the office. And then just a reminder, our next Tenant Talk Live is going to be, oops, everything just moved away. I can't see you guys anymore. But our next Tenant Talk Live is going to be on November 3rd. And I'll drop that link in the chat for you guys. I was trying to get the link and then I lost the screen. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you everybody for joining, and I'll see you in November.